The air was thick with the smell of smoke and betrayal. The morning I stepped outside and saw my tractor, what was left of it, smoldering in the driveway. The metal frame was blackened, the tires melted into the dirt, and the fire had eaten through years of hard work in just a few cruel minutes. I stood there, frozen, watching the last bit of smoke rise into the cold air. My gut twisted, not just from anger, but from knowing exactly who had done it. Her name was Karen Miller, the self-proclaimed head of our neighborhood's HOA. When I moved to Maplewood Estates, I thought I was buying peace and quiet, a small farmhouse, a few acres of open land, and the freedom to live without anyone breathing down my neck. But that peace ended the moment Karen showed up at my door with a clipboard in hand and a fake smile stretched across her face. She told me I had to join the homeowners association. Rules are rules, she said, her tone sugary but sharp underneath. I told her I wasn't interested. I didn't need anyone telling me what color my barn should be or how long my grass could grow. That didn't sit well with her. Over the next few weeks, little things started happening. Trash left on my porch, my mailbox knocked down, someone slashed my tires one night. I knew it wasn't random, it had her written all over it. Karen treated the neighborhood like her kingdom, and anyone who didn't bow to her rules became her enemy. She'd gossip at community meetings, glare at me every time I passed by, and whisper things to the other neighbors. I tried to ignore it. I thought if I kept to myself, it would stop. But it didn't. It got worse. That morning, when I saw my tractor burning, realized it had gone too far. Karen had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I watched her from across the street, standing on her porch with the cup of coffee in hand, pretending she didn't see the flames. But I saw the smug little grin she tried to hide. She thought I was powerless, just another stubborn old man who wouldn't play by her rules. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just any neighbor. I was Sheriff Mark Reynolds, and the moment I put that badge back on my chest, she was about to learn exactly what happens when you mess with the wrong man. I hadn't worn the badge in almost 3 years. After 25 years on the force, I'd retired thinking I'd finally earned a quiet life, mornings with black coffee, afternoons fixing fences, and nights spent under a sky full of stars. But as I stood there staring at that burned-out tractor, I felt that old familiar pull in my gut, the one that told me something wasn't right, and it was time to act. Karen Miller wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was the kind of person who needed control like others needed air. From the moment I moved in, she'd been testing how far she could push. At first, it was little things, complaining that my mailbox didn't fit the community aesthetic, or that my dog barked too loud. But over time, it grew into something darker. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. And now, she just made it personal. The fire department came and went, filing their report and shaking their heads. "Looks like arson," one of them said quietly, but without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I didn't tell them what I already knew. I wanted to be sure before I made a move. Later that afternoon, I drove into town, the smell of smoke still clinging to my clothes. The hardware store owner, Tom, waved when I came in. He'd lived here longer than anyone and knew every bit of gossip that floated through the county. When I asked him about Karen, his eyes narrowed a little. "That woman's trouble, Mark. She's been running that HOA like a private army. Last month, she fined a widow $200 because her Christmas lights were still up in January." He shook his head. "People around here are scared of her." That didn't surprise me. Fear was Karen's favorite weapon. She knew how to make people feel small using her position, her connections, her endless letters filled with threats of violations. Most folks just gave in to keep the peace. But peace bought with fear isn't peace at all. As I drove back home, I noticed something strange. A dark SUV was parked across the street from my house, its engine running but no one stepping out. I slowed down, pretending not to notice, then parked and went inside. From my kitchen window, I watched it sit there for nearly 20 minutes before finally driving off. That's when I realized this wasn't just a petty neighborhood feud anymore. Someone was watching me, and if Karen thought she could scare me into leaving, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Because the man she decided to pick a fight with still knew exactly how to uncover the truth, and this time, I wasn't wearing the badge for the county. I was wearing it for myself. The next few days were uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that every move I made was being watched. The neighborhood, once quiet and peaceful, suddenly felt different, colder, almost staged. Karen's house sat right across the cul-de-sac, her blinds always half open, like eyes that never blinked. I noticed her walking her little white dog every morning at the same time, pausing just long enough to stare toward my property before pretending to fix her leash. She wasn't just bold, she was calculating. I decided to start digging quietly. I called a few old friends still in the department, men I trusted. One of them, Deputy Harris, told me there had been a few complaints filed against Karen in the past year. Harassment, intimidation, even tampering with property lines. But every case mysteriously disappeared before reaching court. Someone was protecting her, and that someone had influence. That piece of information settled like a stone in my chest. I started looking through public records that night. It didn't take long before I found something interesting. Karen wasn't even supposed to be the HOA president anymore. Her term had expired 6 months earlier, but no election had been held. She'd simply declared herself acting president until further notice. It was classic Karen bending rules while pretending to enforce them. While I was piecing things together, other neighbors began reaching out. First, it was Mrs. Turner, the elderly woman from 2 houses down. She came over with a pie, trembling slightly as she spoke. "Karen's been bullying everyone, Mark. She tells us she'll fine us if we talk to you." Then came Jake, a single dad who ran a small landscaping business. "She got my truck towed because I parked in front of my own house," he said bitterly. "Nobody wants to cross her. She knows too much about everyone." It became clear this wasn't just about me or a burned tractor. Karen had built her own little empire out here, one that ran on fear and control. And now that someone was standing up to her, she was getting desperate. Late one evening, while reviewing my security camera footage, I caught something that made my stomach tighten. Around midnight, a figure walked up my driveway wearing a hoodie, carrying something metallic in hand. The person paused near my garage door, glancing around before placing a small object beside one of the tires of my truck. The footage was grainy, but I knew that gait. I'd seen it enough times from my kitchen window. It was Karen, and whatever she was trying to do next, it wasn't going to end with just a burned tractor. I barely slept that night. The image of Karen sneaking up my driveway replayed over and over in my mind. By morning, I'd made up my mind it was time to turn the tables. For weeks, she'd been playing games, using fear to keep everyone in line. But I wasn't going to wait for her next move. I wanted to know exactly what she was planning, and I wanted her to know that I wasn't afraid. I drove into town early, picking up a small hidden camera system and a few motion sensors. By noon, I'd installed them across my property in the trees, near the fence, even behind the mailbox. If Karen came near my land again, have proof this time. But I also knew this wasn't just about catching her. It was about showing her that her control was slipping. Later that day, I walked over to her house. She opened the door before I could even knock, smiling that same smug smile. "Sheriff Reynolds," she said sweetly. Or should I say former sheriff? Her tone dripped with sarcasm. I looked her straight in the eye. "You've crossed a line, Karen," I said evenly. "You might think you're untouchable, but every lie leaves a trail, and I'm following it." Her expression faltered just for a second before she slammed the door in my face. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, the glow from my security monitor flickering beside me. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. Around midnight, motion alerts started popping up one after another. Someone was moving near the back gate. I zoomed in on the feed and saw 2 shadows, one tall and one shorter, sneaking across my yard. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside quietly. The air was cold, the ground damp under my boots. I could hear muffled voices, a woman's and a man's. They were near the shed. As I got closer, I caught bits of their conversation. "Just pour it here," the man said nervously. "Hurry up before he sees us." I froze, realizing what was happening. They weren't just trespassing, they were trying to destroy what was left of my property. I stepped forward, my voice steady but loud enough to cut through the darkness. "You might want to stop right there." The flashlight beam caught their faces, Karen and a young man I didn't recognize. Both of them froze like deer in headlights. For the first time, Karen didn't look smug or confident. She looked caught. But before I could say another word, something behind me snapped a branch. Heavy footsteps, another presence in the dark. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about Karen anymore. There was someone else involved, someone who didn't want the truth coming out at all. The sound behind me was sharp and deliberate, the crunch of boots on gravel. I turned slowly, keeping the flashlight low, my instincts kicking in like old muscle memory. Out of the darkness stepped a man I hadn't seen in years, Deputy Harris. But something was off. He wasn't in uniform, and the way he held himself told me he wasn't here on official business. "Mark," he said quietly, glancing between me and Karen, "you need to step away." My heart dropped. "Harris, what are you doing here?" Karen looked almost relieved now, her earlier fear replaced by that familiar arrogance. She folded her arms, smirking. "Told you he'd show up," she muttered. That's when it clicked. Harris wasn't just helping me gather information, he'd been feeding it to her. My so-called ally was working both sides. I felt a wave of disbelief, anger, and something deeper, betrayal. "Looks like you figured it out," Harris said with a shrug, his voice calm but cold. "Karen and I have an understanding. Keeps things quiet around here." I kept my voice steady. "You've been protecting her, covering up the complaints." He didn't deny it. "People like her keep the money flowing. Developers, investors, donors, they all like a clean neighborhood on paper. You were just a problem she needed gone." The truth hit hard. This wasn't just about a burned tractor or HOA politics. It was about money and power, the kind that made people bend rules and bury evidence. And I'd walked right into their game. Karen stepped forward, her voice dripping with triumph. "You see, Mark, you can't stop what's already in motion. This neighborhood is changing. You don't fit in anymore." But before she could finish, a new sound broke through the distant hum of an approaching engine. Headlights flashed from the road as a pickup truck pulled up fast. Jake, my neighbor, jumped out, his face tense. "I saw the lights in your yard," he called out, gripping a flashlight of his own. "What's going on here?" Karen's smile vanished. Harris tensed, his hand twitching toward his jacket pocket. For a moment, no one moved. The cold night air hung heavy, filled with unspoken threats. I took a slow breath, my eyes locked on Harris. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "No, Mark, you are." Then, in one swift motion, Harris stepped closer, and I saw something glint in the faint light. Jake shouted, Karen stumbled back, and everything erupted into chaos. In that split second, I knew the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly. Everything seemed to happen in a single blur. Harris lunged forward, but Jake moved faster. He grabbed Harris by the arm, and the two men struggled in the dirt as Karen screamed for them to stop. My flashlight hit the ground, rolling until its beam landed on the small metal object that had slipped from Harris's hand, a flash drive, not a weapon. That stopped me cold. I reached down and picked it up, and as I turned it over, I saw a small label scratched into the surface. HOA Records. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Even Karen's face went pale. "Give that to me," she demanded, her voice shaking now. I stared at her, my mind racing. "This is what this was all about, isn't it? What's on here, Karen?" She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. Jake held Harris pinned until I ordered him to let go. "We're done playing games," I said quietly. "We're going to see what's on this drive." We went inside my house, the air thick with tension. Karen stood by the door, pacing, while Harris leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. I plugged the drive into my old laptop and waited. Within seconds, folders started to open. Financial statements, property reports, even scanned documents from the county office. It was all there. Karen had been using the HOA as a personal cash machine, taking fines from residents, redirecting maintenance funds, and falsifying payments. Harris had been helping her cover it up in exchange for a cut. The entire neighborhood had been paying into her pocket for years. Jake looked stunned. "She stole from everyone," he whispered. Karen's voice cracked. "You don't understand, Mark. This place was falling apart before I took charge. I kept it together. I deserve something for that." I turned to her, shaking my head. "You burned my tractor to protect this? You threatened good people just to hide your greed?" Before I could say another word, Harris made a break for the door. Jake caught him halfway, and a scuffle broke out again. The flash drive nearly hit the floor, but I grabbed it just in time. Outside, the sound of sirens echoed through the night. Someone had called for backup. Karen sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Harris was done running. I could see it in his eyes. But just as the sirens grew louder, something unexpected appeared on the screen. One last document, recently added. It wasn't signed by Karen or Harris. It was a deed transfer, filed in my name, selling my property to the HOA. I froze. "What is this?" I asked slowly. Karen looked up, tears streaming down her face. "That wasn't me," she whispered. "Someone else wanted you gone, Mark." And as the red and blue lights flashed through the window, I realized the story wasn't over. It had only just uncovered something much bigger. The deputies arrived within minutes, their headlights cutting through the darkness as they pulled up my driveway. Harris didn't resist when they cuffed him. He just hung his head, silent, like a man who finally realized his luck had run out. Karen sat quietly on the porch, wrapped in a blanket one of the officers gave her. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with arrogance now looked small, her power gone, like smoke after a fire. I handed over the flash drive to Deputy Collins, a younger officer I trusted. "Everything's on there," I said. "Financial records, false reports, even the document about my property. He nodded, slipping it into an evidence bag. As the officers took Karen and Harris away, I stood in the yard, the night finally still again. The air was cool, the stars faint behind the lingering haze. Jake stayed beside me, arms crossed, watching the patrol cars disappear down the road. "Guess you found your proof," he said quietly. "Yeah," I answered, though my voice was heavy. "But it feels less like a victory and more like cleaning up a mess that should be never happened." Over the next few days, the truth came out fast. The county investigators confirmed everything: the embezzlement, the fake fines, and the corruption that had kept Karen in power. Harris lost his badge and faced multiple charges for obstruction. Karen was removed from the HOA and later indicted for fraud and property damage. The community, once divided and fearful, started to come together again. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months gathered for the first time without the weight of her control. I repaired my property slowly, piece by piece. Jake and a few others helped rebuild the fence and clear out what was left of the burned tractor. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about taking back what peace really meant. A few weeks later, I received an envelope from the county clerk's office. Inside was a letter confirming that the fraudulent deed had been voided. My land was mine again. But tucked behind it was another document, a note from the state sheriff's department. They were reopening old HOA investigations, asking if I'd be willing to consult. I smiled, folding the letter carefully. I'd thought I'd left that part of my life behind. But maybe it wasn't about wearing the badge anymore. Maybe it was about making sure no one like Karen ever had that kind of power again. As the sun dipped behind the hills, I looked out over the land I'd fought to protect, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd been too afraid to stand up. Peace had finally returned to Maplewood Estates, and this time, it was real.